So Vanessa, thank you. Um, Thank you for your time and your energy and for sharing your Sunday. Um, Sundays are special in my world. They're normally days of like rest if I can. So I really, really appreciate my coffee squeaking. Sorry, I had to open that. It was whistling. I appreciate your presence here. Um, and thank you for sharing your stories. It's not easy, and it's certainly not easy in this electronic world. Um, One of the questions that came up was, is there a ritual for forgiving yourself that you use with a client? Or do you have any tips on how to hold a container for forgiveness?
Mm. Oh, I love that question. Yeah. Um, so I use uh, my background is in writing, right? Literature and writing. So I tend to use narrative and writing exercises, and then we take those things and put them into something that has a somatic component. So it's different and it's individual based on who I'm working with, but generally I'm working with a writing component and then a somatic component, and that can be anything from burning the writing, to moving the body in a certain way, right? It depends on who the person is. But I try to do kind of something that gets them working through the mind and then also through the body and through actually doing something tangible. With the client that I spoke about on the video, the writing exercise that we did was that I challenged her to write out what she was telling herself in her mind, what she was actually saying to herself about herself on one side of a paper. And so that was, of course, a lot of cruelty. I mean, it was, you know, basically telling herself she's a bad person, right? I mean, a lot of cruelty about her inability to rise above, and if you were stronger, if you were smarter, right? All of this stuff, and it was a lot. And then we addressed each thought, each sentence, starting with actually, and rewrote and reconfigured these thoughts with a compassionate lens.
Yes.
So if you were stronger, you would have been able to da da da. And it was like, actually, it has taken incredible strength to carry this as long as you have, right? If you were smarter, you would have never believed him. Actually, you were a child. And children believe what their parents tell them, and that's okay. So all sort of addressing each one, it took time.
Yeah.
But by the time we had done that, the compassion for the self had been able to enter. Right. And then that paper, she wanted it. She wanted to keep it. So we didn't burn it. We didn't send it off on a, we kept it. We put it in a special book. So she has it to return to. If those thoughts keep coming, she can come back to what the compassionate thoughts were. And then we did a somatic practice of, it's like a full body sort of squeezing, self-hugging practice. And said those compassionate words while doing so, and offering her own body a sense of comfort while doing that. It was really meaningful. Yeah.
I appreciate that so much, the flip on that harshness with self-compassion.
Yeah.
And
It's so challenging. I'd like to credit my godmother. Sark is a author and artist, and it came from her. It's her practice. I learned it from her. I've used it for years. And it operates on a lot of different levels. Like, I've used it mostly for self-forgiveness and self-compassion. It's, just having to re-narrativize things that you think are true about yourself that are negative, having to see how they might be still you doing your best, is really, really helpful. So
in situations where someone is dying, and say someone hasn't really shared about an abuse that has happened to them,
Mm,
and all around them are these swirls of, oh, she's lovely or he's lovely, and
mm,
let's celebrate this person in all of the ways in their glory, and everybody's talking about what a wonderful person that human is, and the whole while you're like, well, actually,
mhm. Yeah, if you only knew,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
what like nuggets would you have for people to grasp onto that with?
Hmm. Um, I think if someone has started to share a story, right? So if you know this, if this is something, so sometimes you just sense it.
Mhm.
Like there's one family member who can't like enter the deification moment, and that family member it has something that you're just sensing like, ooh, I don't think their relationship with that person was clear. I don't think it was, there was something there. If you're just sensing it, I think that that's one area, right, where you can gently ask them, do you want to talk about your relationship with them, where it's a heightened time, the complexities of life can all get sort of erased in the dying time. If you have some complex stuff you want to share, I'm here for it, right? Making some space for it if they want to. If the sharing has already happened and you're recognizing like, oh, there's an abuser here, like that's actually what's happening, knowing that of course we can hold the space for someone who's caused harm being a complex person in their own right, their own story, their own, they have their own path that led them there. um, I think if a person who was victimized by the dying person is part of their dying process, that's going to be a very individual situation about whether it's healthy for them to be there or not, whether there is some resolve possible or not.
Mhm.
But the one thing that I think is going to be true no matter what is that that person needs space for their story. They need space to talk it out. And they need to not feel guilty that they're like taking focus away,
Mhm.
or or like undermining the dying process or whatever. Like they need a safe place to be talking about their complex experience of the dying person. And maybe that's you or me, or maybe that's a therapist, or maybe that's their friend. But encouraging, being supportive of, you're not ruining anything, you're not taking anything away, you're not selfish for needing to talk about this right now. Like right now is actually an okay time to talk about this, it's fine, right? That I think is one thread, like that no matter what the other parts of the configuration are, just knowing that someone's probably going to need that space, and they need permission for that space to happen. um I guess that's, yeah, I think that's my answer.
It's so gritty.
Yeah.
um, the 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 not I mean, we have choice, and we have free will, and we have all of these things, but we also have reality
Mm-hmm.
of circumstance and situation, and like the ability to um, be authentic with what you want, and also the ability to recognize the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
They clash sometimes, and when there is a point where you can't like be gentle with yourself for not being able to handle it, um, are there ways that you recommend, without, like, maybe you don't want to divulge your whole story, but how do you talk to the people around you? Is it as simple as saying, I can't do this?
Mm,
Or like how do we say no? Is maybe that's what I'm asking. How do we say no?
yeah. So as a worker whose boundaries are getting crossed, or as a
As
person whose abuser is the focus,
as a caregiver.
as a caregiver.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Oh man, I don't know. I feel like saying no as a caregiver is literally like my most advanced work right now. Like that is my most advanced work.
Yeah.
Like um
Yeah.
and so I'm gonna so I'm sharing from that position.
Yeah.
um that uh when I have been able to set boundaries that felt hard to set, like when I have been able to say, I need to step out of this now, or I'm going to have my phone off for 2 hours, or, um, I think that there's like maybe three components to a good boundary set for me. One of them is that I trust that the consequence for the boundary isn't going to explode the situation. And if you can't trust that, it's very, very hard to set it, right? Like if you're afraid that if you set a boundary or you say no to something, that the blowback is then gonna like the whole situation's gonna be a mess now and it's gonna be about that. That's really, really hard. And sometimes we just know that that's the case. Like, oh, the focus is going to turn on this because this is the thing to grab onto. And like, so being able to know that no matter what the consequence is, that if there is a consequence, that this boundary is yours and it's okay. Like really sinking into recognizing that setting a boundary sometimes has a consequence outside of you, right? That's one thing. The next thing is to have the boundary be clear and actually a boundary, like not just an open-ended, I can't, I'm out, right?
Yeah.
But a boundary that says, I'm going to take the night, or this is a conversation we're going to have in 2 months, but not now, right? That kind of thing. Like boundaries that have finite endpoints that people can understand. Like, I need a few hours with my phone off. This conversation doesn't feel appropriate for me. I wonder if I can help you find the person with whom you need to speak, right?
Yeah.
That being able, it's a skill, and and I do think that it's very, very difficult if you're starting to have like a an activated response and you just want to get out.
Yeah.
But being able to like breathe back in and be like, okay, what is the boundary that I need right now? I need time out. And I need it to be, this amount of time, and then we'll return or something, I think that's saying no with an activity or an action or a future that the person can hold on to seems to be the way to, to smooth it and to have it move.
Yeah. And so when I like a small chunk, it's like creating boundaries per action almost, or per situation, so that they can be really clear. They can basically boundaries for the boundary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And especially if it's trying to stop harm that's happening in the moment, right? Like there's a real intensity to trying to stop. Like if somebody's starting to act out and the harm is coming, being able to say, I'm going to cut it right here, and I'm going to take a break, and I want to hear what's really going on for you, but we're not going to speak to each other this way. I mean, that sounds so simple.
And when you say that it's a practice, like it totally is. Like being able to check in with your body and like recognize where you feel all of this, right? Where does it come up, and how do you work it? Like almost creating for the idea of a toolbox, right? Like in your toolbox, what do you do when you feel like this? Like what are the steps that you can tell yourself, okay, this works for when I feel like this, I'm going to go to this tool, and I'm going to breathe, stretch, if you can take a little walk, but sort of like build yourself a go-to.
Yes.
Right. And then maybe that sort of a that no, I'll be back, I can't do this now, might, it has space to be there,
Yeah.
and not so much like a no, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when I was first starting to do recovery work from living with a violent person, my therapist at the time taught me that I just was constantly, all the time, internally liking and not liking what was happening.
Yeah.
And to start really getting sensitive to when I had a full body yes about what was going on, and when I was like, no, 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 no. I mean, this is fight or flight, get me the hell out of here, right? But that a lot of life was kind of right here,
Okay.
where I was confused about whether it was okay or not. And I was absorbing a lot of this. And my therapist was like, listen, this is still a no. So you can start to develop a sensitivity to like, oh no, I'm good. This is good. This is fine. I don't really like this. I'm going to change something. I'm going to change something here, you know, because my standard was here. And like, I wasn't changing my situation unless it was like dire. And so that is something that people with abuse histories and trauma histories are really used to. We're just used to hating things that are happening to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad, right? But you have to actually retrain your body to be more sensitive to what feels good, to what feels safe, to what feels like doable, and to have your standards get higher. And the main thing that I had to do was start getting more and more sensitive to what is my body doing. I dissociate. I'll suddenly be staring into a tiny, 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 tiny spot if something starts happening that I don't like, right? And if I start doing that in a death situation, like I need a minute. Like, you know, I've lost the big picture of what's happening. I need a minute to kind of come back. So there's certain things that you can start noticing, I think, in yourself that will help you guide, you know, your responses to the moment. But yeah, it is about slowing it down a lot of the time. And, you know, I have a breath practice that's really helpful to me too. So somatic, somatic, somatic.
Is there, are there specific breath practices that you would share? Is it?
Yeah, I can hand you one right now. I do a style called integrative conscious breath work. It's not particularly Googleable, so don't worry about it. I have a practitioner in LA that I work with here, but I can share one practice that I really love called the circle breath. I use it all the time.
Please.
And you know, a lot of people are familiar with a box breath, right? Where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. That's a good one too. The circle breath is actually better for me personally, just the way my body works. The circle breath is a connected breath. There's no holding at the bottom or the top. You think about a circle that's like a wheel coming out in front of you, and the upper part of the circle is your inhale. So you're inhaling, and then you're exhaling. And then you're inhaling, right? And it's a slow breath through the mouth. It looks like this. You don't have to move your hand in the circle. I'm just doing that for the imagery. You can just have the imagery in your mind, but it's a circle that comes out in front of you and then back. And the circle size is about chin to pelvis. So you're imagining that shape, and you keep the breath connected. It's really effective for me. I do it for about 2 minutes, like in the car before I go into any situation. I do it in the middle of things. I'll just do it in the middle of things. It helps to actually set a timer and do it for a minute or two. Or you can just do 4 or 5 at a time. But I really love that one. That like having an image for my like fizzy brain to like, okay, I got to be on this circle now. And the connected breath, the effect of a connected breath is that the tension that happens when you're holding, you actually just don't get to do it. It just keeps moving. The breath just keeps moving. So that's one that I use to ground, and I find it's really effective for me.
I love circles so much more than squares. So that too, like even like the imagery of that end of the circle, and then like visually imagining shit just falling off because you're at that and you're coming back in, like all of this stuff can kind of just fall off the circle.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Summer.
Hi, sorry I'm running a few minutes late. Vanessa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Cute hat.
Thank you. I wish I was wearing it right now.
Yeah, like building those tools and those know-hows in a way that it just becomes like, oh, I remember I have this, I can do that. I feel like in those situations when you are around people who have been harmful or who are currently harmful is like this protective membrane that we can wear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, I think, you know, sometimes the somatic practices, because I have a bunch of them, usually it's a session that I teach with people. The somatic practices can feel like insultingly effective. Like you think that whatever you're going through requires a larger thing. Like, you know what I mean? Especially if you're a person like me who like had years of being on Xanax and like lots of pharmaceuticals to handle what I was going through. Doing 2 minutes of breathing and having it be effective for me, I was kind of offended, actually. It was like, no, my problems are larger than that.
It's like, I got big shit. What are you talking about? Some breath?
Yeah, no, that's like for real. I think that's a real thing. And like it was for me. And I definitely, when I'm showing other people, I see so much like, it's not just resistance. It's like, they just don't buy it. You know, it's just like, that shit's not going to help me. Like I'm freaking out over here. Right. And so remembering that like sensitivity to those practices builds over time, that if something doesn't help you the first time, it doesn't mean it never will. You know, like, I mean, the hardest part about healing, the hardest part about grieving is the patience, right? I mean, why isn't it over yet? Why am I not better yet? And so I don't want to offer somatic practices with this, like I don't have a toxic positivity about them. Like I know that they're sometimes like really irritating, and that sometimes they're irritating even when they work, because then you're like humbled by it, right? Yeah. So I just want to hold some space for that too. Like I now have a little bit of humor about that, but when I first started doing these practices, I was like, I didn't really want them to work because I wanted more attention to my problems. I wanted more space for the harm. And so that's part of what I do now also, is making sure that like that holding space for harm is number one, right? Holding space, letting people talk it out as much as they need to, letting them know that it's okay to tell the story 100 times if they need to tell the story 100 times. And the somatic practices are there to sort of support that movement, not to pave it over or silence it.
Yeah. Mm. Would you mind talking a little bit more about the ritual that you gave your client for forgiveness of themselves?
Yeah, so I mentioned that a little bit earlier. This was it's a ritual that does modify and adapt, and so individually, I think people are going to have different needs. But when I'm doing any kind of ritual, I do try to make sure that if it has a writing component, which most of mine do, because that's my background, a writing component and then a somatic component, a component where the body is involved, where there's movement of the body. So for that client, we made a list of all of the things that she was saying to herself in her mind, the thoughts that were unforgiving, the things she was saying. If you were smarter, you wouldn't have believed his lies. If you were stronger, you would have, you would have gotten out earlier and taken better care of yourself. And you wasted so much time. And you should have been able to forgive him because he's an old man now. I mean, all these kinds of things. And then once she had kind of dumped that and gotten to the point where she was pretty sure most of it was out on the page, we went back and addressed each one of those statements with a loving, compassionate reframe. And sometimes it was very, very difficult to find the reframe because she really believed whatever the negative thing was, you know. She really did believe that if she was stronger, she would have forgiven him earlier. And sitting with that one was really hard. And the reframe that eventually worked for her was, actually, it's taken a lot of strength to carry this.
So this ritual, you can kind of like extrapolate it to just the way that you engage with yourself. Is that true, period?
Yeah, I think so. I've used it in a lot of different scenarios. It's been very, very helpful for me as an abuse survivor to reframe the internalization of my victim blaming. So I had a lot of shame for my participation in my own abuse, right? A lot of shame. And it's one thing to be on Instagram and have people be like, it wasn't your fault, you know, like, and it's another thing to like go into what it feels like to really believe that it kind of was your fault. And this practice, doing it a few times, I mean, you know, it doesn't all get fixed the one time. A ritual is, to me, what a ritual is a turning point. Not an ending of all of the stuff, but a turning point in the frame, in how we're going to handle it. And I like to think of it as like, you know, if you're steering a boat, not that I've ever steered a boat, but if you're steering a boat, you turn it a tiny bit and it goes a totally different place, right? So this is not about arriving at the totally different place. This is about the turn. Yeah. And a ritual is a little turn that can just take you in a different direction with something. So the practice of writing down what doesn't work for me, what am I telling myself that's harming me, that's keeping me in this cycle of shame and self-hatred, and then addressing it with compassion. Every time I do it, it becomes easier to think my way into the compassion and then to start feeling the compassion. And then, like I said, I always pair it with a somatic practice so that the body moves differently once those thoughts are coming.
When you engage in that and you keep coming up like with the same self-talk,
yeah,
what do you recommend? Even like, no matter how many times you are compassionate with yourself, and you're stuck with something, is there something that you would recommend to get over that? Or a different way to engage that block?
Yeah. So again, this is I'm going to credit Sark with this. She really helped me work on this, and I've modified it for myself because the way she does it is a little bit different. And I think whoever then, you know, like it modifies depending on who's doing it. But when I get a repetition over and over again, I think of that as like, that's a personality. That's a like symbolic representation that has something really serious they're trying to do. And usually what they're trying to do internally is protect me from further harm. So when I get a repetition, and I have one that I call the gladiator, she really wants me to overwork myself. Like she's like, you just need to die of work. That is your honorable death. You will die of overwork. So get back on it. You know, she's very mean. Like she's super mean. And she's ferocious. And she has very consistent things she says to me, very, very consistent things. So when I start writing out what's happening, I recognize there are certain things that I'm like, that's the gladiator. There she is. She wants something. What does she want? What is she going for? And usually it's some kind of survival fear about how I'm going to make enough money to live. It's a desire to, create legacy, and a fear that I'm going to be forgotten. There's all kinds of things involved, but she really believes that we have to pound the shit out of it to make it happen, right? And so what I've tried to do is imagine her and give her other jobs, because there are things in my life that need that energy, that need a ferocious fighter. but I don't like her to be turning it actually back on the self. And so I try to turn, like, see what I can do to imagine her doing something else. And I'll like write her a letter, like, here's where I need you. I actually really need you to make that call to the student loan office. That's what we need. Can we call the student loan office together? And can I redirect her energy towards something where it's appropriate?
Oh, that's great. That's so great.
It's kind of abstract, right? But I don't know. I think it's, for me, it really, it's helpful. I hope it helps someone else. Oh, here's some questions. How do you allow them to hold this space but not identify as it? I actually might need a little more to know where that question is headed. The question is, how do you allow them to hold this space but not identify as it? I'm not sure who the them is or the it at the end. If someone could give me just a little bit more on that question.
Well, while we wait for that clarification to come in, Danny asked, what are some practices for keeping big feelings around for a while without doing harm?
Keeping big feelings around for a while without doing harm. Yeah, I return to the breath constantly. I return to the breath. I return to the basics. I used to tell myself, you know, this too will pass. And now I just say this too. And it has something to do with not trying to get it over with.
Yes. Yeah.
And just knowing sometimes the big feelings really do take their time. They do move. And I have all of these practices now that help me assist myself in allowing things to move. And what's actually happened is that instead of, you know, all of these years of like pushing things away, repressing them, trying not to feel them, I was very much afraid that if I actually allowed the pain to come, that if I went into how I really felt about my abuse and my abuser and my trauma, that I would be lost, that I would never emerge. And I think that that's part of the fear of it, right? Is like, I will descend into a suicidal depression from which I will not emerge. Allowing that possibility to just be there, like, yeah, that actually is a possibility. Lots of people do that. And knowing that that's real, and also knowing that I've built in things in my life to help prevent that from happening, and that I've created spaces in my life for feelings to exist where I'm not going to get dropped. I think that that's, you know, having some faith in the structures that you build, and knowing that the structures that you build to hold you are going to do it. It's hard. It's hard. But that, you know, remembering that feelings want to move. They actually don't like to get stuck in the body your whole life. They make you sick when you do that, right? Like feelings, I mean, that's my belief anyway, that feelings actually want to move through. They, you know, they're like expansion, contraction, right? Feelings want to do that. And if we can more fully allow them to do that, they might be more intense, but they also move faster. And that's the goal, is to just kind of let them be what they are. It's hard. I mean, I know as I'm talking, I'm like, like B- on that yesterday, Vanessa, right?
But that's legit. And thank you. I mean, thank you for bringing that into conversation, because it's not like you come up with this packet or this process for yourself and it works all the time.
Right.
You know, it's not like you immediately are able to ignore the ways that your body is screaming at you to move into this, you know what, I'm going to be right back. I need a break. Like, you know, you can have that tool, and you may have gone there like 40 times.
Yeah.
And then time 41, it's like, actually, fucker, you know, so you I think that like giving space for people being human and and acting the ways that humans can and do, and not feeling shame, right?
Yeah.
Like shake the shame off, shake the things off, and give yourself grace,
Hmm.
and do better when we can do better.
Right. Yeah. The more complicated you get with these things, you know, the sometimes the harder it is to actually get down to the original feeling. So if something happens and I don't like it, it scares me or it feels bad. And then I feel ashamed for feeling that way. And then I know I'm not supposed to feel shame. So then I feel secretive about feeling shame, about feeling bad, right? We can get like extremely layered in this way. And being able to recognize that sometimes it takes time to get down to what actually was the thing. And that was part of the story I was sharing about, you know, I had this like full 24 hours of being triggered after this experience with my grandma, and I couldn't figure out like, why am I so freaked out, you know, like I had to really take time. Yeah, meta feelings, exactly. Thanks, Beverly. Yeah, I was like, I had to really take time to get down into like, oh, my body got hit. That was bad for me. You know, it took time. And so that's, you know, being patient enough and having enough self-compassion to recognize that there's probably a core base event or feeling that is just, you know, that happened, and that all of the other things that layered on top of it are actually occluding healing that thing. Takes time. Oh, it's 10:05.
It is. It is. That flew. That flew.
Yeah.
Um, Vanessa, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your time and your stories. And yeah, with all of us.
Thanks. Thank you to everyone who showed up and asked questions and engaged. I'm really grateful to be a part of this.
Um, and folks, we have 30 minutes to move our bodies and do some human things between now and our next speaker. I will open that the Zoom room for folks who kind of want to chat with each other. Yeah, it's not open yet because we're here. And that's just how that goes. And if you don't, I hope you get a chance to go move your body and do the things that feel good for you. I might even run out to my garden before I open the Zoom room. We'll see. So thank you for showing up and asking questions.
Yeah. Thank you.